Lesson 18, currency. Right, so in this lesson, what we're going to be talking about is the different types of money or monies that different countries use, right? So you might have noticed that in Canada, our money looks different than it does in the States, and that looks different than it does in Europe, and the money looks different than it does in Mexico or China, right? That's because we're all using different currencies, and actually, even though they look different, they actually have a different value as well, right? So if you give someone a Canadian dollar, right, or a loonie, or you give someone a peso, those are worth very different amounts. You can purchase different amounts of things for that, right? A peso is not worth very much. You can't get much for a single peso, but I guess you can't get much for a dollar either. But I think you get my point. So let's kind of look a little bit deeper into this. So the currencies that we're going to focus on for 10-3 are really going to be these four. I guess five, because we also include our own currency, right? So the Canadian currency. But we're going to compare the Canadian dollar to the United States dollar, the European euro, the Chinese yen, and the Mexican peso. Okay? So how do we figure out what a country's currency should be set to, right? So you might have noticed that sometimes the Canadian dollar is close to the American dollar. There's even been times where it's been above. Like, how does that happen, right? Well, it has to do with how the country is doing financially, right? Like how the economy is running. And it has all kinds of other factors as well that, you could go into and get a degree in. But for the most part, it's based on like, economy and things like that. Sometimes countries even will purposefully make their dollar worth a lot less than it should be for all kinds of other reasons. But yeah, we won't get into that. But in general, the value of a country's currency is based on how the world trade market perceives its value. So the world as a whole that are trading goods, they'll say, well, you know what, we think the Canadian dollar is a little less than the American dollar at this moment, right? And that changes, right? That'll change over time. So if, just for an example, I'll show you my screen here, not that one. There. Okay. So this is a real-time value of the Canadian dollar, right? So you can see the Canadian dollar. This is on the Forex, currency exchange, and this is Canadian to U.S. dollar, right? So the number one thing to look here, right, is they're showing that it's at 0.78613, and that's dollars, right, for compared to one American dollar, right? So that is our like current exchange rate on the market. Now, that's actually not the current exchange rate that you would get if you went to your bank and you were going to exchange your money. So let's look closer at that. So if you look down here at this table, so you'll see two different columns. So we've got what the Bank of Canada sets the rate at, and then what are like community banks. So that that'd be like TD or Scotiabank or something like that, right? So just yeah, so what they might have it set to. Well, the Bank of Canada isn't actually a bank that you could like put your money in. The bank makes a lot of big decisions on things like currency and all that kind of stuff, and interest rates and those things. So the Bank of Canada, looking at that same data that we were just looking at here, sets what they think the Canadian rate is, right? So it'll be a little different than this as well. This is what it's being traded at the moment. The Bank of Canada will use that information, right, and say, well, okay, so this was at a different point in time, right? So our dollar is worth less now than it was when this was made, but this is the kind of the number that we're looking at, right? So 0.94, right, is what they say it's set to. Now the community bank, like if you went to your local bank, you would only get a rate of this, right? So you'd get less money, right? So if you exchanged a dollar Canadian, you'd only get $0.91 American, right? So you get 3 cents less for every dollar. And the reason for that is that your bank wants to make money, right? That's how they're making their money. They're taking some of that, right? They're a private company that makes money off those those interactions, right? And that's the same thing with these, right? So if you exchanged $1 Canadian, then you're going to end up getting back 69 cents in euros. Okay, and then it goes the other way now. If you start buying Chinese yen or the pesos, so $1 Canadian would actually be 12 pesos, 12.24 pesos, right? So you actually, like, it goes up in that case, right? Because the Canadian dollar, we would say, is stronger than the American peso. It's kind of terms that we would use. So sorry, that's the Bank of Canada though. But then the community bank would actually be traded at that. So you'd get less pesos than you would, or than you feel like you should, right? Based on what the current exchange rate is. So yes, that's the idea. So you guys can look through some of these too to kind of get the idea. So you see we got Scotiabank, Bank of Montreal, TD, and just kind of see what some of those are. Compare it. You can compare it to the Bank of Canada as well. Okay, so now how do we calculate these things, right? Well, once we have our conversion rate and notice that we're using our community bank rate, because that's what we would actually get, then what we can do, if we can set up a ratio, right? So you know what? I'll let you guys kind of look through this one. But I'm going to go through some examples again too. So I think that'll be the best. We can work through some of them together here. Okay, so let's go through this. It says calculating currency exchange. Dalton wants to purchase a handheld GPS system for hiking. He found that the item needs that he needs on an American website where it lists is listed at $194.99 US. He then found that the exact item on the Canadian website where it's listed at $249.99 Canadian. Do these two items cost the same? Okay, so what we have to do is we have to compare them, right? So we either have to change the US to Canadian or the Canadian to US, right? So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to set up a ratio. So let's actually just look at the first one. Let's change this in US to Canadian. All right, so we're going to say if we have $194.99 US, I'm going to put US because they're both dollars, right, with the dollar symbol. So we have to like show ourselves or remind ourselves which one we're dealing with. So sometimes it'll be written as just US, or it should be, I guess, US dollars, USD. Okay. And you know what? I should have wrote that a little lower. I'm going to write that down a little bit farther. 194.99 USD. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a ratio. So I'm actually going to put X over top of this. Okay, just kind of bear with me. So I've got X over 194.99 US, and what the X is going to stand for is going to be my Canadian dollars. So that's going to be Canadian dollars, right? So that's what I'm looking for here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set up a simple ratio. Okay, so I'm going to say this is equal to, and then whatever the actual ratio was from above. So the way this is going to work is if I have Canadian dollars on the top, I need to have Canadian dollars on the top on this side as well. So it'll be Canadian dollars I want, and on the bottom is going to be my US dollars. All right, so now I just got to use my ratio. So let's go back up to our ratios that we're using for this. It's going to be this, and this is going to be on the questions that you guys are doing as well. Will be the same table here. So we see that for any $1 Canadian, it's 0.91 American or US, right? So let's write that in. So it'd be for every $1 Canadian, it's going to be $0.94 or 94 cents American. All right, so now we have just a tiny bit of algebra to do. Not even really that much algebra. So technically what we're going to do here, we want to get X on its own. So we need to get rid of this guy. Right? I got to get that one out of the denominator. So right now we are dividing by this. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply both sides by 194.99. Okay, so they would cancel on this side. And then on the other side, we'd have it up in the top now, right? We multiply it, so that's going to be 194.99 US dollars, right? Okay, so now what I have left is just X in Canadian dollars. I'll just write it as X is equal to, and then it's just $1 Canadian. So here, I'll write it out again. $1 times $194.99, and then over $0.94, right? Do you see how in the end, because we were using $1, right? Anything times 1 is just itself. Okay, so that didn't really matter. In the end here, I'm just going 194.99 divided by 0.4. So if we do that, we get 194.99 divided by 0.94. Okay, so that's going to be 207.44, because I'll round that 3 up, so 44. So 44 cents. All right, so the question is, are they the same price? Well, not really. The American one was a better deal, wasn't it? Because it was only 207, and I would have paid 250 if I bought it here in Canada. So it was a better deal in US dollars there. All right, so now that I think I might have confused you with a little bit of algebra and like bringing it up and everything else, I'm going to show you just a simple way to narrow this down a little bit to make sure you're on the right track. So let's take that same question, right? And we wanted to change, like at the beginning there, it was $194.99 US, right? We wanted to change that into Canadian, right? Well, let's go back up to our exchange rate. So our exchange rate was, for every $1 Canadian, it was equal to $0.94. Here I should do CAD. It was equal to 0.94 USD. Okay, did you notice in this question, like look what happened there. We had 0.9499 and then divided by 0.94, right? That's always going to be the case, that you are either going to multiply by this number or divide by this number, which is kind of handy because you got 50-50 chance right off the bat, right? So if I want to change this into Canadian, well, all I got to do is either multiply or divide by that number. So let's say we did it wrong. Let's say we went this much American, and I multiplied that by 0.94. Oop, that was weird. Okay. By 0.94 USD. Actually, I won't write that, just multiply by that number. Okay, so if you do that, we would end up getting 194.99 times 0.94. Okay, so I would have got $183.29. Does that make sense? Does that make sense that this would actually be cheaper, right? That because this is Canadian, like we're saying that it would be this in Canadian, right? Is what I was hoping for. That number doesn't make any sense. It would have been more expensive in Canadian, right? Because the American dollar is stronger. So how did this thing get cheaper? Okay, so just using our reason, we can say, okay, well, I did it backwards, right? I just had to divide by 0.94. And that's kind of it, right? Like you can just kind of take that little shortcut if you guys are just doing mental math on these things and using conversion rates in real life. You're just either multiplying or dividing by the conversion rate, and that gets you there, okay? Kurt wants to buy his mom some perfume from Europe. He found her favorite brand for €27.95. What is the price in Canadian funds? Okay, so first off, we need a conversion from euros to Canadian dollars, right? So let's go back up. We'll look at our table there. Okay, so I'm looking at euros, right? So that's this one. All right, so it's 0.66 euros for $1 Canadian. So it is 0.66 euros is equal to $1 Canadian. All right, so now let's write this down again. So we've got 27 euros. Oh, euros. So 0.95. And the good news is we either just have to multiply by this number or divide by this number, right? Now, let's see which one makes sense. So euros are worth more money, right? They're worth more, okay? So they have like more buying power. So would you expect the amount of money you'd get in Canadian dollars from this to be a bigger number or a smaller number? Well, it would be a bigger number, right? Because Canadian dollars aren't worth as much, right? So this would be, you know, like more, right? Okay, so in the end here, if I want this to be a bigger number, well, let's try both things. If I multiply by 0.66, what do you get? So if we go 27.95 times 27.95 times, sorry guys, 27, I'm working through this, 27.95 times, and then 0.66. All right, there we go. So we end up getting a smaller number. Yeah, that actually makes sense, doesn't it? Because I multiply by 0.66. Like that's a decimal, that's a number less than 1. If you multiply by a number less than 1, you make it smaller. What about if I divide by it? So if I go divided by 0.66, what do we get? So if I go 27.95 divided by 0.66, we get a bigger number, right? We get 42.35. So that's $42.35. And there you go, right? It was 50-50 chance. We end up getting the bigger number. So that has to be our answer. Okay, so that's the quick and easy method. You know, if you were just, you know, on the street and you wanted to convert it. The other way, we can set up a ratio, right? So I want you guys to know this as well. So let's say we wanted to figure out Canadian. So I'll call that X. So it's going to be like X Canadian, so CAD, over, and then it's 27.95 euros. And then I set that up over the ratio, right? So now this would be $1 Canadian over, and then it's 0.66 euros. Not that. Okay, so I do a little algebra. I would multiply both sides by 27.95. Or, you know, did you see the pattern from last time that if it's on the bottom of this side, it can just move up to the top on that side, right? That's what happens when you just multiply both sides by that. So we just get X in Canadian is equal to, and then that's going to be $1 times 27.95 euro over 0.66 euro. I don't write euro very often. Okay, so in the end here, yeah, do you see what we did? We went 27.95 divided by 0.66. There you go.